Self-aware Boris knows that normal Boris cannot manage, cannot focus. He won't read papers. He cannot chair meetings to save his life. Did you say that in your blog?
Sounds familiar.
Did you say that he couldn't chair meetings, stick to a plan, or build a high-performance team?
For sure. The way in which the Prime Minister responded constantly to the media was extremely bad. There were specific concerns about his relationship with the Barclays and the Telegraph, and there were specific concerns and also suspicions of possible corruption in terms of his relationship with Osborne and funneling money to the Evening Standard.
Watching PM get his head round stats is awful. He finds relative and absolute risk almost impossible to understand. PM struggled with the whole concept of doubling times, just couldn't get it. He asked questions like, which line is the dark red one? Is he colourblind? And, oh God, bloody hell. But it's all the same stuff he was shown 6 hours ago. A repeated failure to understand graphs, scientific concepts and so on, forgetting things that had been explained to him only a few hours earlier.
He did struggle with some of the concepts, and we did need to repeat them often. A meeting that sticks in my mind was with fellow science advisors from across Europe, when one of them, and I won't say which country, declared that the leader of that country had enormous problems with exponential curves, and the entire phone call burst into laughter. But it was hard work sometimes to try and make sure that he had understood what a particular graph or piece of data was saying.
At 1948, on the 4th of March, so 2 days after the Cobra, you know me, I don't often kick off, but we're fucking up as a government and missing golden opportunities. I will carry on doing what I can, but the whole situation is even worse than you think.
I was concerned at that stage about the ability and structure of the Cabinet Office overall to deliver on the government's priorities. COVID was in my mind, but it wasn't the principal thing that I was messaging about. It was about the Cabinet Office overall, including its ability to deal with COVID.
You are obviously concerned about the general position of the government. And
yes.
On the 4th of March, what
yes.
was the most pressing concern of government?
Well, it was the coronavirus, but I was concerned about the Cabinet Office overall. I don't want to suggest that I was a perfect clairvoyant, very far from it. But it was the case, and I think I also emailed Mr. Cummings around this time as well to point out some of what I believed were the defects in the way in which the Cabinet Office operated. And I made the point then that the situation with coronavirus would only further expose the weaknesses in how the structure of government was set up.
Your view was that Cabinet at that time was designed to place Dominic Cummings and the Prime Minister as the decision makers.
Yeah.
The goal was to centralise power in number 10 with a preference for loyalty over experience.
In Mr. Cummings, the Prime Minister had picked someone that he had decided to, for whatever reason, to trust with a huge amount of responsibility and power. And many times I felt like that many of the key decisions were being made by Mr. Cummings and not the Prime Minister.
You called ministers useless fuckpigs, morons, cunts. Do you think you contributed to a lack of effectiveness on the part of ministers?
No, I think I was reflecting a widespread view.
You denigrated Helen McNamara, and you sent that misogynistic message.
I agree that my language is deplorable, but as you can see for yourself, I deployed the same or worse language about the Prime Minister, Secretary of State and other people.
In the context of this debate between relaxation, promoting the economy, and caution and keeping R below 1, did the Prime Minister take a consistent approach to one or the other sides of that argument?
I think it's fair to say that the Prime Minister felt strongly the arguments for the protection of health and the arguments for liberty and the protection of the economy. My particular beef was that I didn't think there was a trade-off at all.
For all our best efforts to avoid chaotic lurching, the Prime Minister has veered off. Do you recall writing that in your book?
I do, and I remember that period.
Yes. So the answer to the question I put, which is, did the Prime Minister take a consistent line, is not that he was conscious of the debate, both sides, but that you used your efforts as well as the efforts of others to avoid chaotic lurching on his part. And the clear impression you give in your own book, Mr. Hancock, is that yet again he had veered off.
In July, the Prime Minister had been extremely concerned that there was a second wave, and it's reflected in the various communications. And then came back from holiday and was much more concerned with not locking down, and I found that a problem.
What in practice was available, Professor? What could be done in practice?
This is an area where, in my view, government should have started seeing this as a massive threat to the whole UK, economic and social as well as medical. We really did not find easy to get across, and I found this surprising given that so many people in both politics and in the official system are trained in economics, is the extraordinary power of exponential growth to get you from small numbers to large numbers very quickly. People just don't get that.
You refer in your statement to Cabinet and Cabinet Committee meetings being Potemkin meetings. What did you mean by that?
They were for show. Unfortunately, a large part of how the system works is that ministers parade up Downing Street, the cameras click, people act like Cabinet is actually deciding things, but everyone behind the number 10 door actually near power knows that that's very rarely actually what's going on.
You say, late afternoon meeting with the PM on schools. My God, this is complicated. Models will not provide the answer. PM is clearly bamboozled. PM asking whether we've overdone it on the lethality of this disease. PM still confused on different types of test. He holds it in his head for a session and then it goes. Mr. Johnson, it hardly needs saying, was the man who was making decisions that had incredibly broad impacts on the whole country. And it was critical, was it not, that he did understand the advice that he was being given?
Yes.
Was it ever the case that you had the impression that despite repeating things or despite explaining things in a particular way, he actually had completely misunderstood some of the advice?
Certainly when I left a meeting, I would usually be persuaded that we had got him to understand what it was we were trying to say. But as one of the extracts showed that you put up there, that 6 hours later he might not have remembered what was in that presentation. So I can't be sure that he kept it in his mind all the time. I think there was a problem in scientific understanding.
But then this PM looking glum, then suddenly, and I take it this is a quote from him, is the whole thing a mirage? The curves just follow a natural pattern despite what you do. Incredulity in the room. Did that demonstrate just a fundamental misunderstanding?
It was a point that he raised on several occasions, and he would look at the peaks of waves of infection and ask, are the interventions we're making doing that, or is this what would have happened anyway?
You record that the Prime Minister had come back from the Battle of Britain Memorial Service, and then this starts challenging numbers and questioning whether they really translate into deaths. Looked broken, head in hands a lot. Maybe we're licked as a species. We're too shit to get our act together.
Eat out to help out. Do you agree that there wasn't a full, or indeed perhaps any consultation with the CMO or DCMO or the OCMO over that scheme?
Yes, my written statement makes clear there was no consultation. There's no consultation.
I need to put to you that in his witness statement, Boris Johnson says, quote, it was properly discussed, including with Chris and Patrick. Do you agree with that? Or not?
On this one, neither Patrick nor I can recall it, and I think we would have done.
We can see Mr. Johnson said, you speak of briefings from Team Carrie. She hasn't briefed anyone, and my instructions to all were to shut the fuck up. Look at the claims made on behalf of allies of Lee and Dom, that Carrie is secretly forging lockdown policy. This is a totally disgusting orgy of narcissism by a government that should be solving a national crisis. He has a good turn of phrase, Mr. Johnson. Would you agree that there was, in the government of which you played a major part, an orgy of narcissism?
Certainly there was.